So kia ora and welcome everyone to today's Lunch and Learn session. For those of you who haven't met me, my name's Donna Smith. I was just mentioning to Jane, I've just had my hair cut into a mullet to promote conversations around mental health. So I hope you're all feeling well, and in terms of raising the awareness around being able to talk about mental health. And part of mental health that's really important is sleep. So I understand Jane's going to be talking to us about that shortly. So just before we start, just a quick reminder about who we are. So the Lunch and Learn is part of the Child Development and Disability Clinical Network, which is part of the Paediatric Society of New Zealand. So you can see on the slide there that there's some information about its organisation of health professionals, looking at engaging with other health professionals. So it's great to see you guys all here today. And then the idea is, no, you're fine. Just looking at providing education and support and networking. And our website is there. And then if we flick on Jane, if you want to do so, I'd like to introduce Jane to those of you who haven't had the pleasure of meeting her. So Jane works at, I was going to say, it's all changed names, isn't it? Te Whatu Ora Waitemata, where she is a paediatric physio and the clinical lead. She's been working as a paediatric physio for more than 25 years in the UK and in 4 different health boards, and for the Ministry of Ed, and in private practice. So a real richness in her story there. Currently working with the community child health team, and I had the pleasure of getting to work with her and on the ward. And she's just completed her Masters research thesis through Otago. So she's going to be presenting about caregivers and sleep systems. And asked me just to mention that on in the chat is Jane's contact details. So she's looking for some people to join her in a project. And we've also got our Padlet page up. If anyone's got any questions, you can put through there. And I will also try and keep an eye on the chat so we can have some questions through there. So
thanks, Donna.
I'll hand over to Jane.
Thank you. So kia ora, ko Jane Hamer tōku ingoa. So as Donna said, I've just completed my Masters exploring caregivers' experience of implementing sleep systems. And today I'm just going to talk about the findings, and I hope that you find something that makes you have a think about what we need to do about what they tell us and how we can support children and their families. And my next steps are to undertake a caregiver and clinician partnership group. So I don't want to call it a focus group because that means I'm going to have to do more research, but I'm doing a partnership group to try and work together to implement those findings to help improve care. And I'm hoping that you might join me. So as Donna said, please reach out to me if you're interested. And that is not just clinicians. I'm hoping that some families have joined today because I've had colleagues sharing with their families. So please reach out to me on my work email, which is in the chat. Today, as I talk, I'd like you to pay attention and consider these 3 questions. Does our current intervention or approach address caregivers' goals and priorities? And is the support given in a way that caregivers want? And is the language that we commonly use helpful or a barrier? So just a quick reminder in case you aren't au fait with this intervention. I don't know, sorry, if there are people could mute themselves on chat would be helpful for me. So just a quick reminder in case you aren't au fait with this intervention. So 24-hour postural management, or I am now trying to use the word 24-hour postural care, because management makes it sound as though I'm the boss, whereas care, we're in partnership together. And it's a kinder word, which is one of the things that families talked about. So it's an approach used to support children across their whole day. And it's typically with equipment in sitting, standing, walking and lying. But it's not just equipment. It is an individualized approach, including the whole multidisciplinary team, providing surgery, medication, Botox, stretches, splinting and exercise, as well as positioning equipment. The focus of my study was the use of sleep systems or lying support as part of this 24-hour postural management or postural care approach. And these are some of the examples of types of typical unsupported lying postures with equipment and positioning into more neutral or protective postures. So I work with children with complex neurodisability and their families, and I came to this research because of the challenges both myself and, excuse me, many of my colleagues experience supporting parents and children using sleep systems as part of their 24-hour postural care programs. So postural care, over 20 years ago, an amazing OT advocated to include lying equipment as part of 24-hour postural care for children. And following a successful pilot project, which actually started in Waitemata, a national training program and universal funding model was rolled out. And this led to an increase in my understanding and a passion to support children across the lifespan by helping prevent body shape distortion, to maintain and support bodies free of pain and discomfort that they could enjoy using for the rest of their lives. Now, I don't know if you heard me say I really emphasize the word prevent, and that's going to come up later in my talk, that language, that deficit body structure and function language. So over the years, I've experienced some successful outcomes, but lots of challenges for both families and therapists. And in practice, I found that while standing frames and wheelchairs appeared easier for families to use, implementing and sustaining sleep system use was hardest for both therapists and families and had the highest rates of abandonment. Many therapists said this work was hard to know what was needed, what equipment to get, and to get families to use it consistently. And it seemed to me that sleep systems worked for some children and their families and not others. And I wondered why. Was it something to do with the child, the parent and family, the types of equipment, or perhaps it was us, the therapists? Together with some literature suggested that therapist training and development of an integrated care pathway would increase confidence and skill. So together with a group of us started working on developing a pathway. But at the same time, I realized that I needed to understand more, and I began my postgrad dip in rehabilitation in 2015, exploring why. I chose interpretive description as the qualitative methodology for my master's because it supports research from an applied health perspective. It's driven by a desire to address a clinical problem and to then generate specific knowledge that can be applied clinically to inform practice. And that was my goal. Basically, interpretive description is a qualitative method. It's quite, you would say, on the triangle of evidence-based practice, it's a low level, but it's really designed for people like us, clinicians, who come up with a question, not because our professor gave us the question of what to find out. We've come up with the question because that's a problem or a challenge or a difficulty that we and our patients experience every day. Scaffolding is an important aspect of interpretive description, and it's comprised of two main parts, the literature review and disciplinary positioning. So basically, it's the foundation on which you build the interpretive description or you build the research. And the disciplinary positioning is a way to identify if I had any bias that might influence the creation of knowledge. Of course, I have bias. I'm a pediatric physio with over 25 years. And that's also one thing that's great about interpretive description, because it acknowledges that you come with a clinical perspective. And so it's seen as necessary because the clinical problem was generated because of my clinical experience. The other part of scaffolding is the literature review, which provided inconclusive evidence into the effectiveness of sleep systems. Sleep systems may prevent or reduce deformity, may enhance or impair respiratory function, may improve sleep quality, pain and quality of life. Evidence suggests that sleep systems should be implemented early and that care pathways increase skills. But a critique of the literature is that there are no RCTs, so caution is needed. However, we all know it's really hard to undertake RCTs on such a heterogeneous population. Additionally, if we look at the literature in relation to the ICF, we find that current literature really focuses heavily over here in body structure and function, in particular in relation to the hips and spine, with very little measurement of other aspects of the ICF. And we know that evidence now shows us that activity and participation is where we need to be shifting some of our focus to be actually meeting parents' goals. About halfway through my master's, I realized I needed to do a second literature review on caregivers' experience of a broader range of 24-hour postural management. So here, caregivers included teachers, teacher aides, therapists, and the environment was in the school, in kindergarten, preschool, and home. What I found in this is that children's comfort and equipment was critical to caregivers' willingness to persevere with equipment. And interestingly, caregivers and clinicians about comfort and equipment was really different, with clinicians mostly thinking if the child was positioned and they looked straight, they would be comfortable, and caregivers had a completely different interpretation of if their child was comfortable or not. The number of equipment items and repositioning needs across the day negatively added to their burden of care. And when caregivers had training and access to care pathways, their confidence and skill increased. And finally, their relationship with the team, getting the right support, and their beliefs about clinicians' skill was critical to their experience. So I completed semi-structured interviews with 7 mothers and 2 fathers of 8 children. They were aged between 3 and 17 years with complex neurodisability with a range of sleep system use. Ethnicity was diverse, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to interview children under the age of 2 years. Data collection occurred during COVID, but I was able to undertake 6 interviews in the caregiver's home with 2 taken over the phone, and data was recorded, transcribed, and then analysed. So what did I find out? Following analysis of the data, 3 themes were developed. The first theme, It's a Complex Night, relates to the nighttime health challenges caregivers experienced when caring for a child with complex disability that impacted their ability to use sleep systems. Caregivers' priorities or goals were always about to keep them well and out of hospital, and that revolved around managing seizures and respiratory needs overnight, and sleep of the child. And those priorities were of sleep for the child and themselves, and those priorities were way above prioritizing sleep system use. The parents described needing to constantly juggle those priorities and the challenges of wrestling with that dilemma of balancing all the needs and priorities at night, and the guilt of not meeting some of those needs, like sleep system use. Time was a really important part of their conversation when they were talking about It's a Complex Night, and they spoke of therapists recommending that they implement sleep systems without fully understanding their life at night. The second theme, This Is What I Know, reflects the existing knowledge, beliefs, and values caregivers had specifically about their child's health and sleep, and how this influenced their ability to implement sleep systems. And 2 sub-themes were developed. The first is What I Know About My Child. And in this theme, again, time was significant, with caregivers experience heightened emotion in the child's early years when there was so much that they didn't know about their child's health needs and they didn't understand the health system. And when caregivers spoke about the future, they spoke about the unknown future for their child, with most describing feelings of fear, anger, overwhelm, and denial. And this future element is something that I think is really critical to the way we work with families, because typically in our conversations with sleep systems, we talk about future prevention. And they said when therapists spoke about the future, caregivers described the typical sleep system messaging of future prevention of deformity as unhelpful because of the fear of yet another unknown problem lying in wait for them. This language of time was an aha moment for me, of suddenly realizing that the time and future that caregivers spoke of meant something really different to me. And I started seeing the influence of time everywhere in their stories. Their learning style was really important. The way they preferred to learn was critical, with some wanting to be told what to do and others preferring to learn by themselves. Well, we don't know how parents want to learn. So understanding their preferences is critical to increasing successful sleep system implementation. It means we have to give information differently, not the way we think we need to give it, but find out how parents want to learn about something and then meet them with where they are. Sharing information and knowledge is a fundamental component of family-centered care. And it's critical that as clinicians, we consider this when working with families to help support sleep system use. The second sub-theme was sleep systems and unnecessary evil. And it is actually what a caregiver said to me, that they felt that sleep systems were evil. And here, caregivers spoke about knowing that sleep systems were to help the child's body, especially the hips and spine, by keeping the child straight. I mean, for me, that showed me that we were really clear in our support and education and sharing information with parents about why sleep systems were important. However, for caregivers, this understanding was at odds with commonly held beliefs that sleep systems were restrictive. And many believed that sleep was a time of freedom to move and freedom from all the other daytime equipment. And this made me think about the typical information and support that have been given to caregivers, back to the ICF, of body alignment and prevention of hip problems versus supporting sleep and comfort, and here's the key word, protection for the future. The third theme, Support Me to Support My Child, talks about the importance of the therapeutic relationship and the way they want support and the impact of this on their experience of sleep systems. Caregivers wanted timely support and talked about the challenges of waiting lists and the lack of therapists to help and the process of supply and trials and discharge from services and the negative impact of this on their experience, on their belief about the importance of sleep systems. You know, we go in and we say to families, like, sleep systems, it's really important. It's about protecting the body. Like, in the future, these things are going to happen. And then they wait for 3 or 4 months for a piece of equipment. Well, our messaging about how important it is, it doesn't line up with, actually, is it really important because it took this long to get it for me? And I know there are challenges about trials and everything, but they really talked about that, like, really how important it is as if you can't get to me and support my child. They spoke about respecting their knowledge. They described filtering all the knowledge we give them through the lens of their own situation and their understanding about what they already knew about their own child and family. And sleep system information was well received when therapists acknowledged and respected their existing knowledge. Many wanted, like I've already said, some people wanted to be told what to do, other people wanted to work together with you, but nearly all of them said they wanted information provided in a collaborative coaching way with suggestions rather than directives. And they described that effective sleep system communication included listening and non-judgment, and this helped build relationships of trust and partnership. They wanted a strengths-based approach, encouraging hope and optimism for their child's future. And I think that's as simple as changing the language in the first instance from prevention to protection. And basically, all of those things are elements of family-centered care principles and behaviours that reflects the language we need to use. The way information was communicated, either positively or negatively, impacted their experience of sleep system use. So, what do we do next? And what does it mean for us? We need to know and learn more about caregivers' nighttime challenges, especially children's and parents' sleep and health needs. We need to shift focus away from a sole focus on body structure and function and onto including other ICF domains of activity and participation, for example, onto a focus of sleep of both the child and family. This slide that I've put up here is an infographic that came out 2021, and it was, you may know that there are international 24 activity guidelines for children and all children. And then this was an infographic from research about translating that into children with cerebral palsy, also known as, other disability conditions, but 24-hour activity guidelines for children and adolescents with disability. And I don't know if you can see it, but this biggest cogwheel is sleep. And sleep as an activity, parents talk to us about their biggest challenges about sleep at night. So that really needs to be, if we want sleep systems to be implemented, we need to come to where parents are. This is an infographic I use with a lot of families. I found it really helpful. So it's not just me spouting about what's important to a child. It's all of these things become part of the child's activity. We need to change the language of our sleep system messaging to be more positive and hopeful, using strengths-based language of postural care versus postural management, and providing comfort and protection versus prevention. And this language provides hope and encouragement. We need to better consider caregivers' beliefs, their needs, and capacity and understanding during intervention. And I wonder if we actually adequately meet cultural needs. I spoke before about parents. We know that 24-hour postural care and that nighttime is an opportunity for supporting postural care, and parents' belief that nighttime is a freedom from equipment. But if we could have a conversation with families about how does your child move typically during the day? Do they need somebody to move them? If they're not moving in the day, they will not be moving at night. And that might be a hard thing to say, but having that conversation about that's why we provide the best support. You have support in the day. Doesn't mean you don't have times of freedom of movement, but children with complex disability have up to 70% of their day is spent in lying, whether that's nighttime or during the day. That's a long time to have the impact of gravity working on a child's body. And finally, we need to think about what training we need for both caregivers and clinicians to increase our knowledge and understanding to help achieve better outcomes and experience. So through this journey of rigorous critical learning, I have developed a greater understanding of caregivers' experience of implementing sleep systems. For me, it's like a puzzle. Each family's situation is different, and there's not one simple answer, but there are some key pieces that are needed to get the just right outcome for each family. I hadn't appreciated the element of time, the difference that future meant to families compared with my understanding. And this made me think about time in a different way. I hadn't appreciated the negative effect of our typical body structure and function-focused language of prevention versus protection. And I hadn't fully appreciated caregivers' goals or priorities and the importance of sleep. In my thesis, I proposed some practice recommendations, and I've already started on a journey of implementation. But right now, I'm interested to hear your thoughts, if we've got time today. And maybe we can find out, what are your takeaways from this presentation? What's one thing you might go away and do differently after hearing these findings? And what would your recommendations be for my next step in implementing this into practice? Next month, our Lunch and Learn session is knowledge translation time, and it's an opportunity to discuss this together. So please come back next month, think of these questions, and let's talk about it next month. Also, you see my email there in the bottom of the slide, and it's also, as Donna said, over in the chat, because I'm really interested in you joining me in my next steps of implementation. So finally, thank you for listening to my presentation. Thank you to my supervisors, and huge special thanks to all the parents who shared their experiences to allow this study. Off you go. Donna, if you want to read this one, the Padlet page and the, oh, you're on mute, Donna.
Just somebody on the Padlet asking for the password, but there shouldn't have been a password to come in. Cool, fantastic, Jane. That got me thinking heaps. in terms of especially language and things as well. So like Jane was saying, please come back next month, and we'll have a discussion around Jane's presentation today. One question from Kath. Jane just asking if you
can I just stop the share so everyone can see each other? And because I purposely tried to make it enough time so that people could talk if they want to.
Yep. Kath's just asked if you'd be able to send the link for the infographic around the
sure
parts of the day with sleep, the cog.
Yeah. Maybe I'll do that with Parry, because I don't have it right here. It's an article, and then at the end of the article, you know how they have hyperlinks, and so the hyperlink goes to the infographic. So I can, but I probably can share the PDF straight away anyway. We could maybe put it up on our YouTube thing.
Yep, no, that's great. Awesome.
The article is really worth reading. So as well as having that infographic to share with families, I would encourage you all to read it as well.
Fantastic. So Jane's keen to have a chat with anyone there. So is anybody got any questions? Okay.
I'm hoping that there may be some parents that are here that come join me. I would love to. I'm hoping that the next bit that I've already recruited, sounds terrible, but I've got 4 families who I'm hoping to work with to share my findings and then see what they say about the next step is. So it's not just what the Masters is, the next step, together in partnership with people. Sorry, someone was going to ask.
I think the lovely Cherie has a question. Hi, Cherie.
Hey, kia ora, hello. Thank you, Jane, for such an amazing presentation. It's really good to have the caregiver's perspective. Just in your own clinical practice as a practitioner, is there any tools that you've used to shape some of these conversations and to guide the language, as you were saying, when you're exploring sleep with families?
I think it starts right off in the very first conversation that you have. I mean, mostly we're not doing sleep systems as the first bit of a piece of work with families. Well, I'm not, usually if you're working alongside families. So it really goes back to the coaching conversations about finding out what's important to the family and making sure, like I usually take along, and it's from Medifab, and I see that Shai is here, but that 24-hour clock, I often start with that, so that when you go in and I'm talking with the family, it's a piece of paper in front of them that I can be saying, like, what time do you wake up in the day? And then, and what's it? I often say, like, tell me about how your day starts. And they might say something and I'm like, often before I go through the whole day to get to the night last, I then go backwards. So as soon as someone tells me how they've woken up, I'm like, oh, what was your night like before there? And how did you wake up? So I purposely try to ask about the whole day and say things like, what was that like? Tell me more. Has it ever been better? Would you like it to be different? Have you asked anybody else for help around this? So that somebody who sees me as a physio going in thinking, I'm going to teach their child how to walk, which, that's often what we get as physios. They can see that I'm asking all sorts of questions, because 24-hour postural care is all of our business. Like that's what we said at the beginning. It's Botox, baclofen, splints. That's 24-hour postural care. And if I can find something out and identify what priorities are, if that's about sleep, then I can often I try and start with sleep and comfort, and then say, well, that's the good news story, because I've got this wonderful thing that's going to actually help you with sleep. It will be part of it's not going to fix sleep, because research shows that children with disability, a high percentage have issues with sleep, and it goes in waves like everything. Sleep may be great for a time, and then something else happens for them and sleep gets really bad. So there's no one cure. But I often use that sort of language. Well, good news story, I've got something that might be able to help you improve comfort and sleep. Like if the child is comfortable and we're supporting their body with this postural care equipment, I think that sleep might improve. So that's sort of how I do it. Does that answer your question, Cherie?
It's really well put. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Sheree, and thank you, Jane. Just another thing coming from Elizabeth Edwards, just saying important information on sleep for children with disabilities and their caregivers, and just highlighting that the World Sleep Day is on 17th of March, Friday.
Oh, thanks, Elizabeth. I didn't know
and
that.
The theme for this year is sleep is essential for health. So
wow. I'm on that bus.
Does that mean
Elizabeth.
we get to stay home and sleep?
Means you can talk about sleep when you come to work.
Yeah.
I'm interested, like I know that there's some education therapists here, and I know there's a real challenge for therapists in education and partnering alongside therapists in health and families when, you know, you're working on the, you know, you see the child during their daytime. And I guess, I don't know if anybody's got any comment there, but I would be, you know, sleep rather than equipment is a way to, as I think, to start a conversation with parents when they have IPs and things like that about, you know, how your child is at school during the day, is how well they sleep at night and how's that going for you. It's a great way to start, because if they're really tired or scratchy, they can't learn, right? And that's often the reason that parents are there. And I don't know about every child development team across the country, but certainly in Waitemata, we try really hard to work with therapists in education and in you know, mainstream and in special schools. And I'm not saying it works perfectly every time, but we try and work really hard that when we're working with a family who's in a special school or whatever, to partner with the therapists that are their daytime therapists. So I know there are barriers, but I think that infographic about talking about is a great way with families that you don't see very much. You know, you can send it home and say, this is current research, look how important sleep is, you know, tell me what's happening at night. Let me work alongside the therapist and health to see if we can work together to help you with that or something. I don't know, but
yeah, we do talk to the parents about positioning when we meet them during IEPs, and we work closely with the community therapists. And they usually come to school to do the measurements if parents can't have them at home. So yeah, we do mention sleep system quite often.
Yeah, I guess it's because sleep systems is just the intervention we do when we're thinking about one of the biggest priorities for families is sleep. So we might be in our own little pockets, but if that's the priority for the family, then all of us need to be somehow doing work to support that.
Yeah, but because we don't go in the home, we don't get to see how the room is set up and what they need. So yeah, we
challenges everywhere.
The community therapist to do the measurement and all, but we don't know how it is set up at home and how much it is used. Yeah.
I see, Elizabeth, you've said, do any of the children in your study need to use respiratory support for sleep? Yes, they did. There are quite a few in there. So yeah, that's a big challenge for those children. I'm aware we've gone over time, and I'm excited that so many people are talking now. So that means you're going to come back next month and join us. Hey, Donna. Oh, you're muted again.
Yes,
Donna.
please. And we will send out a reminder and things as well. But yeah, it'll be fantastic. And especially, it sounds like Jane's hang on another project.
Yep.
Partnership group. Use the right terminology. But
I don't know. The only thing I want to say is I don't want to call it a focus group, because that means it's research.
Yes. So definitely, like Jane's done all this amazing work. It would be awesome to see how we can actually change it in practice. So highly recommend if you can get in contact with her, that would be fantastic.
Oh, I see Pauline Penny's put up if you're there, you're still in the chat now. Yep. Pauline's already put the infographic up. Thanks, Pauline.
Cool. And everybody's just saying thank you very much, Jane. So so we'll see you all in a month. Please contact Jane if you can be part of it and share it with your families, because the best way we can change practice is in partnership with our families. So thank you very much. Yeah, and thank you from me, Jane. I'm about due to start my master's, so it got me doing lots of questions as well.
I would encourage people to join the Paediatric Society of New Zealand. It's not just for physicians, it's for all of us, and especially as we head to the I think if you all came to the study day that was put on last week, the Paediatric Society hosted a morning for free, mostly for health professionals, allied health professionals, and Turid invited as many people that could join the Paediatric Society of New Zealand, their special interest group, so that we are all working together as we merge towards, Te Whatu Ora and Te Whakaha, and the children that we work alongside, how they may be impacted by the changes. So raising the voice of children and families is really important in this time of change, so that their voices don't get lost. So join along. Paediatric Society, you just have to get nominated by someone. I will nominate anybody that asks me to join.
Cool. Fantastic. I'm going to stop the recording now. So thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, Donna, for hosting.